Okay, so we're back and ready for another deep dive. And today we're going to be talking about something pretty big.
Yes.
Um, the overturning of Roe v. Wade.
Right.
It's been in the news for quite a while.
It has.
And you sent over some really interesting research on this,
Well, I tried.
especially, focusing on those implications for late-term abortions, which is
Yeah,
a sensitive area.
absolutely.
But, as always, we're going to try to present all sides
Definitely.
and really just use those sources that you shared as our guide,
Yes.
right?
Right.
So it's interesting. One of the first things I saw pop up in a lot of this research
Okay.
is this big constitutional debate.
Yeah.
We've got folks who really think that Roe v. Wade was like judicial overreach,
Yeah.
that, it was the courts kind of like stepping in and making decisions that really should have been left to
The
men
voters.
and their elected representatives.
Yeah. Exactly. And so the idea that the Constitution doesn't explicitly guarantee the right to an abortion
Right.
was kind of the basis for a lot of people who felt that overturning Roe
Mm-hmm.
was about giving that power back to the states.
Back to the state.
Yeah.
So, instead of having that sort of blanket
The blanket ruling. Yeah.
across the country,
Mm-hmm.
each state gets to decide.
Exactly. And that plays into this idea of individual choice, too.
Individual choice.
A lot of people who support this idea of overturning Roe
Yeah.
say that it gives citizens more power to influence the laws in their state
Right.
through their legislature and voting.
Yeah. And I guess the question then is like, does that actually give more choice
To everybody.
to everybody? Right.
Yeah.
What about those people who are living in states where
Exactly.
the laws are really restrictive?
And that's something that was addressed in one of the articles you sent. Kind of looking at that question of, while some people may feel like their views are better represented at the state level,
Uh-huh.
it might create huge obstacles for other people
Right.
when it comes to exercising that right to choose.
Right. Yeah.
This is certainly a complex issue.
It's complicated. There's
Yeah.
so many pieces to this.
There are.
And then I think it's interesting, too, how, we can shift to that conversation about the moral and social arguments,
Yeah.
because
Absolutely.
many people who supported overturning Roe,
Mm-hmm.
they really hold that belief that life begins at conception.
Right.
So for them, abortion is
It's morally equivalent to
ending a human life.
taking a life, yes. And that perspective really fueled a lot of the support for those laws that reflect that belief, even in cases of rape or incest, which was something that
Yeah, that was a big
came up in a couple of the sources.
big focus in some of the sources that you sent over.
Yeah.
And there was also that counter-argument that was presented, too, right?
Yes.
About
This idea that shifting focus away from abortion could lead to,
more support
more support for mothers and families.
and better
Or
rhetoric.
resources
Resources
for things like adoption
Perspectives.
and more comprehensive health care for pregnant women and families.
And I think that's an interesting point, too, because I know a couple of those articles also went into the complexities of adoption.
Absolutely.
It's not a simple solution.
It's not a simple solution at all.
There's the emotional and financial burdens to think about,
Mm-hmm.
whether there are enough suitable families available, and then also some of those systemic issues that can make it a really tough process.
Absolutely.
Isn't it a whole conversation there?
Another can of worms.
Yeah. And then, speaking of complicated,
Well, right.
we have to talk about the impact on late-term abortions.
Yes, which
Wait.
was kind of the focus of your research.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the sources that you sent me really focused on that.
Right.
And I guess just to be clear, late term
Yeah.
generally means
Generally, we're talking about after about 24 weeks of pregnancy.
okay.
Okay.
So that's where this whole patchwork of state laws
Yes.
gets really, really interesting.
Very interesting.
Okay.
Complicated.
Because we have states like I know you highlighted Texas and Alabama,
Right.
where they've basically implemented near total bans.
Near total bans, yeah.
Very few exceptions.
Right.
But then you have states like New York, Colorado, and Oregon
Yeah.
that have laws that allow for late-term abortions.
Particularly when a mother's health is at risk
Right.
or if there are severe fetal abnormalities.
Right. And there was that one article that I think really stood out to me that shared a story about a woman in Texas
Yes.
who actually had to travel to another state for a late-term abortion
Yes, I remember that one.
because her pregnancy was no longer viable.
It was really powerful.
And it really, I think, brought a human element.
Absolutely, to
Danica.
all of this.
And it's a good example of how these legal changes are really impacting
Real people.
real people
Yeah.
and their lives.
And it just kind of highlights that.
It highlights this whole idea that we're in this decentralized system now
Right.
when it comes to abortion,
Right. And so it's different
especially later in pregnancy.
depending on where you live.
Exactly. It really depends on where you live.
So we've got, this huge shift of power to the states.
Mm-hmm.
We've got all these moral and social beliefs at play.
Right.
And then this whole different landscape for late-term abortions.
Yeah.
It's a lot to unpack
It's a lot to unpack.
in one deep dive.
And it kind of brings up that question, what are the long-term implications?
Societal.
Societal, legal,
How is this going to impact,
people's lives,
Yeah.
healthcare systems.
the fabric of our nation?
Yeah, moving forward.
It's a question we all have to consider.
Absolutely.
So thanks for joining me on this deep dive.
My pleasure. Into this really complicated issue.
It was great.
And I really hope, this encourages everyone to do a little research on their own.
Absolutely.
Form your own informed opinions.
Yes.
We'll see you next time.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye.